following program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.
Hello and welcome to Perspectives. My name is David Schoneman. I'm your host on this program. On Perspectives, we take a look at a variety of issues on the national, state, and even the local level that are of really big concern and importance to the folks here in Nashua. Well, today we're going to take a look at an important local event and a milestone in the course of the tax year. Today is May 21st, 2019, and if you're a Nashua resident, you know that your tax bills have come out in the last week or so. Now, this is the second bill on the revaluations that were done by KRT about 6 months to a year ago. And it's at a lower rate, but if you're one of most of the taxpayers here in the city, you're going to find that your tax bill is higher because your values went up considerably. A few weeks ago, I spoke with Laurie Ortelano on Carl Seidel's show about some of the issues with the reassessment, revaluation, and the new tax rate, and some of the discrepancies or perhaps inconsistencies that were present in the valuation process that really are causing concern to a lot of voters here in Nashua. So today we're going to take a look at this issue again, and once again I have Laurie Ortelano in the studio. Laurie's a resident on Berkeley Street here in Nashua, and she and her husband have been there for a few years. They bought their house a few years ago, and were very surprised to see their value jump considerably with that revaluation, particularly in light of some of the comparisons they've made with some of their neighboring homes, which are in many cases exactly the same, but assessed at a much lower value. We'll take a look at this issue again today. Laurie, thank you very much for coming in. Glad to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
Let's get an update. This started, really, your issue, your involvement in city politics and city life here, certainly with regard to assessing, started when we had the revaluation of the city,
right,
and you saw your values jump considerably. And I think you told me last time we were on Carl Seidel's show that your tax bill went up $10,000.
Well, that was originally when we came to town. There was a adjustment made to our property after we bought it outside of a reevaluation time.
Okay.
And that's when they did a very large increase to our tax bill. And we kind of got stuck in that mode because we didn't know really how to deal with it. We were new and we didn't really understand what the value, we really didn't know what the houses on our street looked like inside. We didn't know our neighbors. They were treating our house as if it was very special, when over time we realized there were a lot of nice homes on Berkeley Street, right, and that our valuation was very high. In 2017, I contacted, the first year we came, the second year we got our tax bill, I tried to reach out to the assessor who created the valuation to say, things aren't right. But I was assured they were. In 2017, I contacted the chief, the former chief of the assessing department, had a very difficult conversation with him, very heated, and he was not very supportive, felt that the bill was fine or the rate, our assessment was fine. Looking back on it now, it was so far off that he should have instantly recognized that there had been a mistake made on this property.
Sure.
Especially because in 2017, the equalization ratio for the city was dropping into the low 80s, which meant that the market value of the home was a good bit higher. So if I was being assessed for a $700,000 home, the city was saying to me, your house is really worth $820,000. It was way out of whack. And I didn't understand what these ratios meant. I was not educated on that. So, but the chief certainly did. But he really pushed me off. And then I decided I was really going to dig in and watch what was going on. And I told him I'm going to be watching closely. And I did. And KRT came out with the new valuations. And they didn't raise ours. They sort of just kept it the same. But even keeping it the same, we were still off by $100,000 in our neighborhood. A lot. That was a lot of value.
It's a lot of value.
So we went and saw fortunately we met with the president of KRT. He grabbed our property card, he started looking, and he's the one who immediately pointed out that he thought we were sales chased, where the assessor had looked at the sale price and rode the assessment value up to the sale price instead of using just basic factors that they're supposed to use when they're assessing a property based on a sale. And the big factor that they moved on us was depreciation. They changed the effective year build of this 100-year-old home, and we're treating it like it was built in 1995. So they basically said to us, your house is only 25 years old now, and your depreciation is going to go down to 9%. You're no longer a property that's worth 30% depreciation. And that turned out to be far too aggressive. It was a very aggressive move, and it drove the valuation to within like 2% of the sale price. And when you
I
do
see.
that outside of a citywide evaluation, outside of a KRT event, it's called sales chasing.
I
And
see.
so then it opened up the whole door into what's really going on in that assessing office. Are they chasing other properties? What policies and procedures are in place? And
Sure, because if this happened to you, it's likely it happened to someone else.
found some other people it happened to.
And you did?
Yes.
Okay. So you found that. And also, when you begin to look at the properties, and if someone has been in their home for a long time and there hasn't sold,
Right.
they could be valued quite a bit lower than you, even though their home is comparable, maybe even worth more.
Huge issue. Huge issue.
Okay.
Because we haven't done a walkthrough or a good analysis of property in 30 years. And so because we haven't really looked at homes in 30 years, then those folks that have been in a home 20 years or more and have even pulled permits, some don't pull permits, some do, but even those who are pulling permits, the valuations of the permits are not really in line with what market value would bring a house to. And I think more significantly is that there's no one in the assessing office that is able to gather data from the various strata of properties, meaning that you look at groups of properties, maybe all homes that are ranches, all homes that are colonials, all homes priced in a certain range, and you start looking at distinguishing features in these properties and how they're moving in uptrending markets or downtrending markets, and you develop models off of that.
Right.
So a good assessor and really a chief will collect, they're like investigators and technicians. They're gathering this data to be able to put into and modify a model when they do a citywide reevaluation. Now, pushing it out every 5 years is the state limit. It is not by any means ideal to go every 5 years. We're in an uptrending market right now. If this market continues to be hot for a couple more years, we're going to have a big slide in our property valuations. We're going to have a ratio that goes down to 75%. That's going to be a big problem when it comes to properties that were already too low, meaning the next valuation cycle, you could see homes doubling in assessment value.
Well, certainly many homes in Nashua did. Well, perhaps not many, but certainly some did.
Some
Many people went up.
categories.
Very large percentage. 100%
Yes.
is probably one of the extreme percentages, but some homes certainly did. I know someone who has some rental properties and their values went up way,
Yes.
just skyrocketed.
Condos.
Condos. So you said a few moments ago that you weren't educated on this, and it sounds like you've gotten a good education.
I have gotten a good education.
School of Hard Knocks, probably.
Exactly.
So you've learned a lot, and you brought some of these issues to the attention of the mayor's office or
Yes.
the mayor's administrators.
Yes.
And of course, you received cooperation and support from them.
Not exactly. It was a tough. It's a tough process.
It is tough.
And
It is
it's
tough.
too tough. I mean, we have to change the culture of the city, I think. We are not open to the residents that come forward. And we're not welcoming to this data that might be available that we need to have looked at.
Right.
And that's, the hackles went up right away,
Right.
within City Hall. They didn't want to address the problems. Everyone kind of scrambled off in their own direction. And anything I tried to bring forward and show them, particularly in the numbers, they were like, no. We don't want to see it. The data's bad. It lies. You're not speaking the truth here. When I first started off gathering some of the data, I didn't have it completely correct. But part of that was because extracting it from the city was so difficult, and there were some layers involved there that nobody would explain to me. They were not forthcoming in saying, okay, when you look at this database, this is where you want to look to check on a piece of sale data. Matter of fact, on a property card, there's 3 different locations you can look to see how they captured sales data. I was looking at 2, but I missed the 3rd one because no one told me. And so that means I dropped a few data points because I didn't know this 3rd field was used. But that was all them not being helpful. They weren't going to try and allow me to be educated. So, you know, it's really unfortunate. I don't really feel I ever had a place to go to in City Hall where I could talk to somebody who would genuinely listen to me.
But you went to the assessor's office. You didn't
Yes.
find it there. You went to the mayor's office.
Yeah, I've never met with the mayor. He has never been willing to sit down with me at all.
Did you go to the coffees with the mayor ever?
I have, and I did bring up issues, and they got pretty heated. He got pretty upset when I would question. The first couple of coffees, he was almost yelling at me with the questions. Actually, rather surprising. And then he kind of took a different approach.
Okay.
But there's a tendency for him not to answer the question. You know, he doesn't want to answer the question. He does not respond to email.
Do you think he knows the answers to the questions?
I gotta believe he's bright enough to. And if he doesn't, somebody in a leadership position would go off and get them.
Right. There's a lot to know in running a city.
There's
It's
a lot
not
to
an
know.
easy job.
And no, I wouldn't want to, you know, be doing what he has to do and cover all the bases.
Sure.
And I don't expect him to have all the answers, but I expect him to either get them. What I found originally is he wasn't even willing to direct me to a place where I could get them. That's what I think was wrong. He didn't say, go to John Griffin. He knew that the CFO did not have his finger on the pulse. I think he realized that. And of course, the management audit report came out and said the CFO doesn't have his finger on the pulse. You know, he's too busy and he hasn't been doing oversight. He knew the chief wasn't coming to the office, that he was absent many hours.
I see.
So he did tell me, you know, go to the chief a couple of times. You know, he didn't actually tell me to do that. What he did say is that our chief is a great expert, you know, great technical expertise. He's there in the office for people to talk to. In fact, he really wasn't in the office, and he really wasn't a gentleman willing to talk to people. And you really need to have a chief that engages with their public and understands the level of understanding each person has to tailor their discussion to what their needs are.
Right.
A good chief knows that.
Now, that's the chief that he's not working for the city any longer.
No, he's
Okay.
gone. And that's a position that was eliminated as well.
Based on the audit that was done.
The audit decided that management in the assessing office was not needed and that they would make this directorship level position that would have all of these departments reporting to it. IT, GIS, assessing, purchasing, risk management, and human resources.
That's an awful lot from one person to be taking on. So it sounds to me like there may have been an acknowledgement, understanding that management is needed specifically in that office,
Yes.
but that rather than bring this to light, let's just push this person aside, let's fix it, and then hopefully everything will go away.
Right.
But of course, things don't go away. And,
No.
because problems don't get solved, and problems don't get solved. We get tax bills. We still see what's going on, and
Right.
things aren't right. So you continued to take a look at the assessing department because you
Right.
just weren't getting the kind of feedback and support that you needed.
No, once that audit report came out, I can honestly tell you, March 1st it came out. And I remember sitting in a local diner downtown having a salad, and I was just sick to my stomach when I saw the chief position was eliminated. You know, my gut told me that's a bad move. That you couldn't run a city assessing office that's creating $10 billion of valuation with no one in charge. And
Right.
that the lack of management, which they clearly cited in the report, had led to the breakdown in all the systems that were within that office and employee issues. You know, they say when the cat's away, the mice play. Well, we had some of those assessors not dedicated to their jobs. Who was there to oversee them?
Right.
Really
So
nobody.
if there's a management problem,
Right.
It probably means we need management.
It
Not
does.
that we need to eliminate the
Not
manager's
right.
position.
I agree. We needed to eliminate that manager,
Sure.
but we
But not
needed
the position.
not the position. We needed to bring in somebody that was a skilled chief, 20 years of experience, been through a lot of different assessing circuits, maybe was an appraiser. I've talked to a number of different people in the state. I've gone up to the Assessing Standards Board's meeting. I took the state statutes class 1 on assessing last week.
Mhm.
Had the pleasure of having a good number of instructors that are chiefs from other towns
Oh, great.
or cities. And there are very talented people in this state
Mhm.
that are very well versed in the technical details of what assessing is about. And what you could see, and what I've been able to see talking to some of them, is they have a lot of passion for their work.
That's great.
It's not sexy.
You want to see people with passion for what they do.
Exactly.
People should enjoy their jobs.
And these folks seem like they really enjoy their job.
Oh, that's great.
They were creative. They considered themselves detectives, investigators, modelers, data gatherers. And it is an interesting job because
Yeah.
there's a lot of different facets to it.
Mhm.
And I think you can always be learning in that position.
Sure.
So I've met so many chiefs that I think would be great for Nashua, the type of person we want to have in our office. But instead, we wiped out the position. So I've been a very big advocate of bringing the position back. And the appointment to this administrative services director, Kim Kleiner, she's very openly said, I have no assessing experience. I'm not, I know nothing about this field. It's a disservice to the residents to put somebody in the office who knows nothing about the field. If you're going to be a high-level director, all these other departments that report to her have a top manager in them. So
Sure.
she's communicating with a top manager.
Right, who's an expert, truly an expert in their field.
They're supposed to have, a good handle on their departments, the employees. They conduct within their management system, employee reviews. You look at the assessing department right now, and you have 4 assessors. Who does their performance reviews? Ms. Kleiner, who has no experience in assessing, she's going to rate your performance. What's that based on? It's just, to me, it doesn't make sense. Mostly because I think it's bad business for the city. We're not getting what we need. And in fact, she took over March 1st, and I sat with her a couple times in meetings, tried to point out some serious deficiencies with the work of some assessors that I had clearly gone forth and filed my state complaint. And I went back to her with data. I hadn't had much success with data with anyone in City Hall, but I thought I would give it a whirl with her. She took over. And, regrettably, it was met with a lot of resistance.
So you met with Ms. Kleiner.
Yep.
You've spoken with the mayor, at least at some of the coffees,
Yes.
whenever possible. You've been to the Board of Aldermen meetings.
Many times.
You've spoken to the microphone a
Yes.
number of times.
Yes.
So you're still not getting
No.
the response that you want. Now, you said you went to the state. Now, the state has an agency. I'm not sure what the name of that agency is, but they've been to Nashua and they've reviewed
Right.
the assessing department,
Right.
and Nashua got a pretty high score.
We did. It's the DRA, the Department of Revenue Administration.
Okay.
And we have the state assigns a director who comes down and reviews the property cards in the city, and they have certain people up at the state level that cover different regions of the state. Now, their review of cards or review of properties is very limited. They look at like 30.
Do they pick them at random on their own, or are they supplied?
I believe they do selections, but they're very targeted. For example, when they look at permits, they only pick permits that are closed. Well, what happens in your assessing office when they fail to close permits and they've been open for 3 to 5 or 6 years? They're not looking at those because the
Right.
city isn't providing that data.
I see.
Well, those are the ones where you say, you're not doing your job. You're missing large chunks of valuation here, or you're neglecting to apply an assessment value to this work done, and this whole other group is paying for the work done. You gotta try. This is all about equity, fairness, and transparency.
Sure.
That's what it is. So, So the city's oversight is, in my opinion, very narrow. And the method and the capture of data that they use in the city of Nashua is the same as Littleton, New Hampshire. So they can go to a town that has less than 3,000 people and they're looking at 30 cards, and they can come to a city with 80,000 people and they look at the 30 cards.
I see.
So it was funny taking the state statutes class. There was a gentleman who was a chief from another city who brought up the fact that he feels this is totally unfair, that the due diligence isn't being given to the cities, and you're actually penalizing the smaller towns by taking a data sample that's so much larger and expecting them to meet certain values. And I think their point is excellent. And I commented to that in the class and really feel that the state needs to come into the cities more frequently, maybe every 3 years. And some of these smaller towns, there's a lot of towns in New Hampshire that reassess every year.
Wow.
Every year. And especially around the Lakes region where they have property that's
Sure.
very dynamic.
Yep.
And they also have a lot of money from
Have
those.
you been getting a good response on the state level, would you say?
Yes.
Better than the city level?
Yes.
Now, you mentioned earlier that KRT took a look at the card, and very quickly they said, something's going on here.
Right.
Has the state had the same kind of response? Did they look at what you presented and say, hey, wait a second, something's going on here?
They're slower to look at it, but they've been very receptive to accepting the data, asking for input, asking for clarity on some pieces of it, additional information. So I feel that the process is moving forward. It's slow. I mean, you work up there through their legal counsel, and they're at the DRA level, they're handling all legal issues around the state.
Sure.
So this is, while to me it's a hugely significant issue, up there, their picture, their window's a little different.
Sure.
So it's a test of patience for sure. But I feel as though they've been receptive. I've always gotten very quick responses back if I email up there. I regularly type updates and tell them, here's from the perspective of a resident, here's what I see is happening. Here's where I fall out on where we're heading. The chief position, for example, is a big concern to me. To not have that addressed. I watched Ms. Kleiner and her staff do an update presentation for the Board of Aldermen on the 30th of April.
Okay.
And it gave a projection of some things that are going to happen over the next 3 to 6 months. And in that report, there is no mention of bringing a chief back.
I see.
So I can project out and say, I don't see anything in the near future. And a matter of fact, there's a new redesign that's happening on the assessing office, and the chief's office has been turned into a conference room. That doesn't make me feel like the chief is coming back,
Right.
Anytime soon.
Right.
And I think it's just a really big mistake.
Yeah.
I think that I think we deserve better here.
Right. Now, you mentioned there were some personnel issues, do you
Yes.
think, going on in the assessing department?
Yes.
The response from the city and the response maybe from the state's been a little more cooperative, but
Yeah.
No one wants to be told, hey, your department, things that are under your jurisdiction aren't working well.
Right.
So there's a certain defensiveness that's going to come with that. No one wants to hear that kind of thing, but still
That's
we
true.
want to hear the city or the state be more responsive to our concerns. Now, you raised some of the personnel concerns, I
Right.
think, at the Board of Aldermen or maybe with Ms. Kleiner or the mayor.
Right.
And you met with a lot of defense
Yes.
for the folks that are there currently.
It's true. And my pitch on the personnel issues, I really focused on it from a data standpoint.
Okay.
Here's a property card that they're handled by different assessors. Under the ethics and the certifications that these assessors have, they need to be able to value defend their work. And if there are questions about their work, they should be able to value defend it.
Absolutely.
And what I found is there were several, but one assessor in particular in there could not value defend anything.
Did you speak with them?
Oh, yeah. And anytime I pointed out, there were 3 occasions that I had him come to the counter and ask specific questions about his work, abatements, property cards. And each time he said, I don't remember. I'd have to look into that. And he'd walk away. but he would never come back with an answer.
Mm.
And he was the individual that came and reviewed our property when we had our abatement done, the brother. And that whole sibling thing was
Now
not.
let's talk about the brother. So there are two brothers
Yes.
working in the same assessing department.
Yes.
One working for the other.
Well, now one of them is a supervisor. The mayor in the May meeting and the March meeting announced that this assessor that has a certification as a supervisor now, which only came in December of this last December. This is not a highly trained or skilled time period experienced supervisor. This is green as can be and questionable about their training because it was all done under a chief who wasn't at work.
I see.
Okay, so what kind of training did he receive for those 3 years? Very questionable. So when the mayor announced that this individual would be serving as a working supervisor, that's when I said, no, we have an anti-nepotism policy.
It's a city policy.
Specifically
You looked it up?
Yep. I emailed Larry Boudreau. Didn't know we had one. I said, do we have an anti-nepotism policy? And that afternoon it comes to my mailbox. When I look at it, it clearly states, no sibling shall be in a management or supervisory role above another relative. No relative. Which makes total sense. There was no
Sure.
caveats to it.
Right. That's logical. That's what it should be.
So, and frankly, I think in City Hall, they have to be very careful when they're pushing people or promoting people or saying this person's going to be a supervisor. I really feel that those positions should be screened through HR before you talk. Even internal people.
Yeah.
What's in their personnel file?
Right.
What's their background? Are they related to somebody? Because it's not, I'm finding it's true in other departments that we have these relationships.
Yeah.
They're not clean.
Yeah.
And they don't follow their policies. So before somebody even internally gets the nod to take on a management position, we need to do a little vetting internally. And
I think we do. I think any private company certainly would. And things are just very different, it seems, in public service. A friend of mine has applied many times for a particular, whatever position he can find, whether it's in public works or parks or whatever. And he's never even gotten an interview.
Yeah.
And he's highly qualified.
Yes.
But he's not related to anybody.
Yeah.
And he calls me up and says, I applied for this and talked to him on the phone. I said, I'm going to be called in. I never hear anything. What happens? And then you find out later that someone else got the job and you realize, well, what's their connection?
Right.
The old, it's not what you know, it's who you know kind of a
Yes.
thing. We need to watch out for that because we can end up with people in roles where it maybe violates a nepotism policy
Which it does.
or they're not really the most skilled because the goal is serving the taxpayers appropriately and well.
Right.
And we don't want to be going down a road where those things don't happen.
Exactly.
So we had a problem with a situation
Right.
where in the assessing department we had two brothers.
Right.
One was going to be supervising the other.
Exactly.
And you took some exception to what this,
Very much so.
the one who was being supervised.
Yes. And
his ability to do the job.
actually, it was the supervisor.
Oh, the supervisor.
Yes,
Okay.
the one who's the supervisor. And I really brought the policy forward. So once I threw that on the table, they kind of had to scramble a little.
Who'd you throw that on the table with?
I took it to the mayor, to Kim Kleiner, and then right to a Board of Aldermen meeting.
Okay.
And I said, here's your policy. Here's your policy. You can't do this. You can't make this guy the working supervisor in there. He can't be performing performance reviews on his brother. It's completely inappropriate. So they backpedaled. They went, oh, okay. He's not going to be a supervisor anymore. He's going to be a, well, they didn't give him a title. But the truth of the matter was, as I watched the office evolve, he was very much serving in a supervisory capacity. And I really kind of pushed on the administration to say, don't say he's not this. If it walks like a duck, squawks like a duck, and looks like a duck, it's a duck. Come on.
Right.
So I've given them a good bit of grief on that because they're masquerading in a way. And but then I was so concerned by the quality of the work by this supervisory level assessor and the fact that he would leave the office so frequently for such long periods of time during the day, be absent, and there was no evidence of work being done.
And he couldn't defend the decisions that he had made.
No. Very unable to defend his work. Very unable.
Anyone really in any kind of role.
Has
If
to.
you're a checkout person at a supermarket, and you better be able to explain why the
have to.
bananas were 39 cents a pound, right?
Exactly. So it just wasn't happening. So out of frustration, I hired a private eye who was who worked for the New Hampshire prosecutor's office. He had 12 years of experience, kind of individual that goes to court on a regular basis to testify on his work. I wanted somebody credible.
Sure.
I wanted somebody not me.
Right.
I wouldn't be viewed as credible. And interestingly enough, those that might say that she has an axe to grind or this is all a personal agenda, the individual that created the very high valuation on our house was the other brother, the non-supervisory brother. It's not as though we targeted this individual specifically. Right. We could have said, oh, we're really frustrated. This is the guy. This is the problem. Well, I do see problems there. I definitely see problems there. My concern was with the other one. When I really looked at property cards and what was happening with data, I was pretty horrified on how these valuations were coming out in the city.
Not just your own, but across
others.
the board.
Oh my goodness. It was pretty scary. And he had been moved into the commercial end of assessment, which, you're dealing with big accounts in there.
Sure.
And you're dealing with a lot of valuation. You got to know what you're doing. And certainly my gut said, it's not there.
And if the city had been more responsive, you probably wouldn't have gone down that path.
I wouldn't have.
Because all you're trying to do is to bring this to light.
Oh my gosh.
Saying,
if they had brought in a new chief, I would have been doing the happy dance.
Yep.
Right? But the new chief wasn't there, and the lady taking over had no knowledge. Okay, so, and now we still got the guy down there who's, quote, got the supervisory certification, who doesn't appear to know much. So, and when he came to our house to look at our valuation, sorry, I probably just hit my microphone. My apologies. But he couldn't answer a single question and left saying, I'll get back to you in a week. And we never heard from him again. So this PI comes on, explained the situation. I said, really, I don't think he's working. He goes out, and when he leaves and signs out on the board field, that means he's supposed to be going, reviewing homes, properties, businesses, gathering data, coming back, making changes to property cards, working on abatements, the whole thing. I said, I don't think it's happening.
And it sounds like the previous manager wasn't coming to work.
No.
And so if that gentleman was setting the tone, the likelihood that the subordinates were doing their job is probably not as high as it should be.
No, when the cat's
Because
away.
he was setting the wrong tone.
No.
Right.
So they were all, there were a few of them were very much on holiday in there, is how I would describe it. Very much on holiday. I want to tell you the bar was low, but it was a low bar. But some days I think there was no bar in there. It was that low.
So what did the private eye find?
Okay, so it
Private
was
investigator, I should say.
It was a little bit of a tricky case for him because this guy kept signing out of work to go view properties. And one would expect if he's going to properties, he'd be driving all around Nashua, different routes. And he had a very typical route. He'd come out of City Hall, get on Elm Street, bang a right on West Hollis, go all the way down past to the Exit 5 intersection, past the police station and school, past the dump, down by the Hollis line, take a left on Countryside Drive, and come out by the rail trail park. And this was over and over again. This was a standard route for him. And it was that right away said to my PO, what's he doing? He seems to just drive the same route. And if it was his lunch hour, he has the right to drive the same route for his lunch hour if he's just going to drive around because he gets a lunch hour. But there were days he signed out just for field work where he's leaving at 10:30 in the morning to go, quote, check a property. And you'd see this route. So that was the first concerning thing. Then the private eye had a hard time once he came down Countryside to the T, whether he was going left or right. He was able to figure out using some of his own technology that he was taking a left, heading up back into the city. So he ended up one of the days parking in the rail trail park after like 6 days of PI work. And the gentleman comes out of City Hall. I actually watched him come out of City Hall and called my investigator and said, he's coming down your way. Drove down and followed him. He's coming right down towards you. And he pulled right into the rail trail and proceeded to stay there for almost 3 hours.
Stay in his car?
Yep. Yep, took a nap, went in full recline, smoked, listened to music.
Yeah, I saw the article in the paper. You submitted a letter from your private investigator
Yes.
to the mayor,
Yes,
to the Board of Aldermen,
yes,
and also to the local newspapers,
Yes.
Telegraph and Union Leader.
right. The article, my attorney letter, the investigative report, and a supplemental report.
And some of those photographs, of course, were included.
Right.
And some of them appeared in the paper.
Right.
And I saw some of those.
Right. And you get what you get from the public, because the paper does as good a job as they can do. They're not giving every detail. I noticed there were some comments like, well, he's entitled to a lunch break. He certainly is.
Sure.
This is beyond a lunch break, though. When you're there for 3 hours.
Yeah, you're not entitled to 3-hour lunch break.
No. And you're not entitled to 2.5. And we had probably 6 data points where he was 2.5 or more hours out, parked either in the rail trail. What happened is he went into the rail trail a couple times, and then the next day he wasn't going into the rail trail. He was banging a left and heading back up to Nashua, and my PI had a hard time finding him. He was like, gosh, he's back up by exit 5. I think he took a right on Northeastern Boulevard. He lost him in there. He was trying to find him. After 2 days of going in that route, I said to him, there's a lot of parking lots on Northeastern Boulevard. There's a lot of places one could hide. He found him in the back corner of the Holiday Inn. That was his typical place to go.
I see.
And I questioned if he could pick up Wi-Fi back there and hang out. So the Holiday Inn ended up being a pretty popular location for him. And it's funny because the location he would go into did not have the security cameras on it. You come into the building and circle around, and the cameras are all there, could see him coming in. And then he'd park in this corner that the camera didn't have an eye on him. And then when he'd come out down the building, and the cameras are all lined down the building. So you could catch him coming in, going out, but you couldn't catch him sitting there because he was in a blind spot.
I see.
And I think he was pretty clever. So he would
Sounds
spend,
like
long periods of time well beyond the lunch hour in the parking lot at the Holiday Inn. So, what we needed next was what he submits for mileage. So what happened January, February, March, he's putting in mileage reports that he's traveling 260 to 300 miles a month in Nashua. Now, one of those months he did 2 trips to Concord for meetings, so that wiped out like 80 miles. So he did 220 or 240 miles a month in Nashua. And to cover that kind of mileage would mean you're visiting a lot of properties.
Right.
A lot. Couple hundred should be seen. There was no evidence of that. Kim Kleiner for April told the assessors that she wanted them to attach their field log with their expense report. So
that's good.
It's good. That's a good accountability thing.
Right.
It should have been done when I raised a question. I raised a question to John Griffin on fraud with this individual in October, early November.
I see.
I went and pulled all the expense reports, and I started looking at what a commercial assessor would go out mileage and get paid, and he was way above it. And it concerned me, and I called John and I said, I think you got a fraud issue here. There's a problem here. And he said, I'll get back to you, and then I never heard from him again. So things get pushed off.
Right.
So all of this push off is what kind of forced my hand.
Sure.
So it's so interesting because I was able to get from Kim Kleiner his mileage report for April, 48 miles. He went from 300 to 48.
Interesting.
And the properties he visited, I don't have the exact count, but it was about 9 for a month. A month. April is the busiest month in that assessing office. They'll tell you, and they did the presentation they did on the 30th. This man was sitting at the table with Kim Kleiner talking about how busy April is. We're out running around, we're closing permits, we're dealing with exemptions, we're working on A9s, we have abatements, we have homes to check.
And this was before the results of your investigation
They came
were
out a
released.
week later. So I'm sitting in that meeting listening to this, knowing darn well that he's been in parking lots for hours. And when the report came out and showed that he had been to about 9 properties for a month, it was disgusting.
Right.
Then the abatement reports are coming out, And we have 375 abatements to deal with the city, and his production is next to nothing. The abatement work that he has done thus far is equivalent to about 3 hours of time in 5 months.
Wow.
That's absurd. So when I tell you there's no bar in there, there's no bar in there. It's not just low, it's non-existent for some. So, and then on top of that, out of the blue, I went to the police station to see if there's any kind of public police report. It was really suggested by my PI, just based on what he observed, that he thought this guy might have a record. I hadn't even really thought about it. And he brought it to my attention 2 or 3 weeks before the report came out. I waited to go to the police until the very last minute because I really was concerned that information might be tipped off ahead of time to people. And I just wanted to make certain that the circle was nice and closed.
Sure.
So the day after the reports are released, I get a call from the police station that there's a report ready for me to pick up. And it cited that there had been 2 pornography incidences in City Hall on city computers in 2006. The incident report was closed in 2007 with this guy. And I think what concerned me the most was it was 2 incidences. So around April of 2006, his boss caught him with pornography on the computer, told him to knock it off. Appears not to have reported it to HR. It was just handled by him. 6 months later, I believe somebody else in the office, a staff person, caught the second round. And that went to HR. IT confiscated the computer, felt that there were child images on the computer. It resulted in a police investigation. The police viewed the computer, went to Human Resources and had an interview with Human Resources. The whole interviews are public data, and he basically acknowledges in his own words that he has been using the city computers for years, viewing this and going on chat lines, and that he had an addiction issue. He discusses very explicit details of what he's doing, how he disguises his identity from a sexual basis, very detailed. And
this is all public information.
All public. I mean, I was so shocked when I got that report. I was stunned.
You're as a concerned citizen, you went to the police department, you asked these questions, and it's available to you.
Totally. Okay. I was shocked it was available.
Yeah.
I was stunned. And so, some of the public comments are, who cares if he looks at porn? I agree. If he's out in his lunch hour in his car looking at it and he's got a lunch hour, that's legal. He gets a lunch hour. As long as he's not caught indecent in a public area,
sure,
it's fine.
Right.
But when you're doing it on city computers and you're confessing to do it multiple hours a day and you're doing it over several years, you're telling the people this, you've been caught twice, and you've got an anti-nepotism policy that came on board in 2003 or so. Mm-hmm. And this is like a 2007 incident. Mm-hmm. Why didn't you take care of this? Mm-hmm. I think this person should have been shown the door and terminated immediately.
Sure, because even if there's, I don't know what the laws are, right, but they're still serving the public. These departments exist to serve the Nashua taxpayers.
And this individual is going into people's homes on a regular basis, into their most private spaces, and the police ended up concluding that the child issue was not an issue, but the whole interview is there on how he uses the adult pornography throughout the workday in City Hall. So when I look at that report and I see what's going on now in the parking lots for very extended periods of time and the lack of work, I do question whether we push the issue from inside City Hall to outside into parking lots. And I question that because this department has been under scrutiny really since November, December. When the mayor ordered the internal audit, that department was under scrutiny. And you would think that everyone working in there would be stepping it up a level, very aware of what public opinion is, putting forth their best effort, And here you have this individual that is freely just going out for hours a day.
So
to
you would
sit-
expect the individuals to step it up, but I would
Absolutely.
also expect that the kinds of things that you and this private investigator found out, I would expect those would have been found out with the internal audit.
They should have been. And that's where
I wonder how serious the internal audit is.
it isn't. That's where
Okay.
I really object. The audit, the individual members or employees of the assessing office were interviewed. And I fully believe that some of the information that was shared by individuals was completely swept under the rug by both John Griffin and Kim. That really, we don't have a sense that that information was really shared. And if I can find this at the next level, why couldn't they identify that there was this performance issue? On top of that, Kim was going down every week having a meeting in the morning. She had started Monday morning meetings. She told me she was, pulling them together. She was going down frequently. She was checking on what was going on. Why didn't she know her assessor was gone 3 or 4 hours a day and not coming back with any work? I don't think she was there at the end of the day to say, what did you do? Plus, they have a reporting system within their software. They use Assess Pro and a Patriot product for assessing. You can run user reports, name reports. You can run reports that show what are all the property cards that have been opened by this assessor, this assessor, this assessor, this assessor, monthly, month to month. I don't think we're generating the reports that we should be generating that look on performance and accountability.
Well, I think that you're probably right. Because if these things had been done, this stuff would have been exposed long ago, it sounds like.
Absolutely.
And it kind of makes me wonder what might be happening in some other departments. We've taken a look at it. You've taken a look at assessing.
Yes.
And we're here on the show to give you a chance to kind of share with the public what you've been doing. You're looking at assessing.
Right.
But there's a lot of city departments.
Absolutely.
And I will say, from my experiences on the Board of Aldermen, running a city is a very, very complicated process.
Yes.
It's a big, big job.
Yes.
And it's probably easy for things to get sloughed aside or
Right.
missed,
Right.
just because it is. But given the fact that it is easy and things have been missed in this
Right.
one department, it really makes you wonder
Definitely.
what else is going on elsewhere.
Right.
And is this one isolated incident truly a bad apple, whether it's a departmental bad apple or an individual bad apple, or just one isolated incident, or is this throughout the city? It makes you wonder.
It does. I think for me, this issue with this assessor is so far beyond this assessor. It's a management issue. It speaks to how City Hall is being managed.
Right, not just one department, but
No.
how City Hall.
And I think that our management overall in City Hall needs a lot more training. I think we have a lot of weak management that they're not doing what they should be doing for their departments. And I think you have to really look closely at how management is performing. What is their turnover in their department? What are the metrics they use to measure performance? What is the education level of our managers? There seems to be a tendency in City Hall to only promote from within.
Right.
And if you need a more technical, like the assessing department needs a chief who's a really technical individual, a male or female who is really a disciplined, well-trained technician of the field of assessing. It's technical, detailed work. We don't have that. We don't have anyone within, and they don't seem to think we need it. When you look over in your public works department, that's a huge department, big budget.
Yes, it is.
Huge. Do we have enough really good top-level engineers sitting in the top positions
Right.
that are trained? Because with a city this large, those skills can make a big difference in how your budgets perform.
They really can. I think you used the term metrics before, and I was on the Board of Aldermen around budget time. Of course, this is budget time now here for the city too. When a budget would come in, one of the things we wanted to find out is if you're asking for more money to accomplish this particular goal,
Yes.
what's the metric for meeting that goal? How are you going to let us know if you've met that goal or not? What's the
Right,
metric?
right.
And really, there weren't any metrics.
No, that's
It's just, we missed the target. We can probably hit the target if you give us more money.
right,
And then next year, it's the same argument.
right,
We missed the target. We can probably hit the target if you give us more money.
right.
And it just becomes just perpetuate this cycle of not meeting the goals
Right.
and asking for more money anyway, and
Right.
getting it.
Right.
And we had the spending cap court case that's was heard by the Supreme Court recently.
Yes, I went up and listened to that.
Yeah, great. I wish
It
I had
was
been around. I
really
would have gone to
It
hear it
was
too.
really an interesting process to be a part of.
It is, I'm sure.
Yes.
But we needed more money because somehow we had to, circumvent the spending cap in order to get this money, but
Right.
no metrics in place for how we're really going to measure the performance. It's
Right.
just more and more and more. And I don't think anyone in the private sector will accept that kind of argument,
No.
more and more and more, no matter
No.
what. It just doesn't work that way. And I think that a city or municipal government seems to survive on that or work that way, and
Right.
we never get anywhere. All that
No.
happens is budgets go up,
We just
spending goes up,
we pay more
taxes go up,
with
and
unmeasured performance.
unmeasured performance.
Yeah.
So
And
metrics are key, and I
they
don't think
are.
they exist.
No, I don't think they exist, and I've become a fairly decent proponent of looking at outsourcing that assessing office. I really feel if the mayor's position is, he continues to take a position that you can't really hire a chief. They're hard to hire. It's hard to get somebody in. We won't find anyone. I'm opposed to not trying.
Yeah.
The lack of effort in trying is almost lazy to me. I mean, you should try.
You
But
should
if-
try. And
if he's-
you've met some good assessors.
Gosh, I've met some
Some
really
of these
good
people
ones.
may come to Nashua if
Right.
we were to.
Plus, we're on the Massachusetts border. Who's to say you couldn't attract talent out of Massachusetts with
We
assessing
have a
departments to come
economic
up?
development director
Right.
from Massachusetts.
So we're in a good location to
Sure.
attract talent across both, within
Sure.
within the state and outside of the state.
Right, we
So,
are.
but when they're not willing to look, I'm concerned. And when you have such deep internal problems among your assessors and there is no bar, I mean, the assessing department has got to be a $900,000 to $1 million budget to run
Right.
assessing.
Right.
That's a lot of money to have unmeasured performance and valuations be so screwed up. So I
Right.
really look at these outside assessing companies that are profit based, and I think they're a lot more solid. The people who run them, they have very technical people running those companies. They know how to model and they know how to maintain data. And they're fairly tightly state regulated because you got to meet the requirements of the DRA. You got to put in the USPAP documents. You've got to meet all these standards. You've got to meet all these deadlines for sales data. So they're measured. They're measured with some state guidance. And quite frankly, as I look at these and they're profit based, they are about making money and taking their business seriously.
Right.
And I feel more confident now in sending this function out of the city than I do leaving it in with what I see. I mean, this investigation that is going on, they've thrown it to an outside lawyer. It is not an independent lawyer, though. It's
Who is it?
It's Drummond and Woodsum out of Portland, Maine, and Mark Broth, I think, is the attorney who's handling the case. This is their go-to legal firm when they need to push something out. So that's the city's legal firm. That is not an independent firm. And so once again, like the internal audit, they could have gone a step further and gone to a truly independent law firm that has never done business with the city.
Sounds like it's still damage control.
It's damage control, and
There's
to
no
some
problem
extent.
here. No problem here.
Right, I'm not confident that they're gonna look at all this performance stuff and say, oh, I'm more convinced now that they're gonna turn around and say, there's no problem here. This guy has, there's no doubt in my mind the performance reviews on this assessor are outstanding.
Yeah.
Because there's no measure.
Right.
But to the public, it's offensive to me that you can do so little, get paid a salary, be able to destroy the equity of a $10 billion database the way you do,
Right.
and hold a job. He should have been removed in 2007. He wasn't. We're in another episode area. I've actually brought data into the table in non-public session to address serious concerns on property cards and whether, across the board in the assessing department, what do they do with that information? They don't seem to act on anything. And I will even tell you that some of my concerns addressed, I'm probably going to be going to court fairly soon over whether or not they really belong in non-public. some of these questions to me are very public questions that are just about an assessor value defending their work. You know, how much do we get to hide behind 91A? We have to be careful on how we use that. So there might be some challenges coming up on that. But yeah, I think we have to look at outsourcing now, and I'm just not confident that the city's going to get to the right answer in saying this is not a valuable employee. And I feel bad because I think I've met a fair number of employees in City Hall that are very hard workers,
Right.
that
I
do
have
their
too.
job well.
Yep.
And
They're
what
passionate about what they do.
and they do it
And
well.
they do it well.
And what does it send? What kind of message do you send to other city workers that come to work, don't abuse their time, do a good job,
Right.
produce quality work product,
Right.
and it doesn't say much about their value when you
Right.
allow this to go on and treat it equivalent to a hard worker, a dedicated worker. So, you know, you'd like to think that they can come to the right answer with an outside city firm, but I'm not certain they're going to.
When is that report going to come out?
Who
Any
knows?
idea?
They don't respond and they don't provide any information on that.
Well, we'll all be looking forward to seeing what is actually turned up by that, because the evidence that you presented, the evidence that was in the paper,
Yes.
looks pretty conclusive to me.
It's not good.
No.
No, it's not. You know, I used an attorney to get an evaluation. I have a friend who has 35 years experience and served as a vice president of a large firm in human resources. And I used that individual as my go-to person on my data I was collecting to review it and give me input on whether it was enough quality, you know, what I needed to do. They were solid on, you've nailed it. This is done. And now I see a city taking a position like, oh, well, this is nothing.
It's one thing for them to be defensive of an employee. I think it's good. I mean, an employer should be defensive of an employee. But once they start getting some information, they have to, I think, transition to remembering who they work for.
Right.
They work for the taxpayers. They don't work for that employee. Their job is not to protect an employee. Their job is to look out for the city, for the taxpayers, make sure that City Hall is delivering a good and valuable service to its customer base.
Absolutely. Yep.
Laurie, we're nearly out of time here.
Yeah.
I see the clock here, and I want to thank you very much for coming in. It's great to
you
have the
so
update.
much
We look forward to more
for
updates.
having me, yes.
It was great having you on Carl Seidel's show, and you know we go for a full hour, and
Yeah.
there's so much information
is.
here that folks at home really need to know this. So thank you very much for coming in. And I want to thank
welcome.
you at home too for tuning in. I'm here with Laurie Ortelano. We've been talking about issues in the assessing department and really perhaps other departments in City Hall as well. I want to make sure that taxpayers are aware and that taxpayers understand that they deserve good service from their government. Thank you very much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.
The preceding program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.